Picture a section in a stadium with more than 120 fans in it. When you think about it, that's a lot of people. Well, according to government estimates, that's how many lives are saved every year because of OSHA's Lockout Tagout standard. There's no doubt that Lockout Tagout saves lives and prevents injuries. Today, we're going to look at what Lockout Tagout is, who needs to understand the Lockout Tagout rules and procedures, and how you should apply and remove Lockout Tagout devices. Let's start with what Lockout Tagout is. It's simply the process of applying a lock and a tag to block the flow of energy from a power source so a piece of equipment won't start up or release energy when you don't want it to. You do this by installing a lockout device at the power source, and in some cases, placing a tag that warns others not to restore the energy. A lockout device refers to a lock, block, or chain that keeps a switch or valve in the off position. Every power source has its own procedure for lockout. It may mean locking out a circuit breaker, locking a valve shut, or using a plug lockout, to name just a few. Lockout tagout locks are provided by your employer. They must be used only for lockout purposes. Never use them to lock a toolbox or storage area. Lockout tagout procedures involve mechanics, machine operators, inspectors, janitors, and others who work around machinery and equipment. These rules also involve other employees and outside contractors who may sometimes come near the equipment. OSHA has defined 3 categories of people who need to be aware of the lockout tagout rules. Authorized employees are those who have been trained to physically lock or tag out machines so service or maintenance work can be done. Affected employees are those who work with or near equipment that can be locked or tagged out. Other employees are those who sometimes may come close to an area where lockout tagout may be used.
Everybody in the facility needs to know about it. If the maintenance people are not available or a technician's not available or something like that, they need to know what to do, who to contact, and in order to keep people from getting hurt.
The Lockout Tagout standard requires that before any maintenance or servicing work begins, hazardous energy sources must be blocked or shut off and isolated. When we say hazardous energy source, the first thing that comes to mind for most people is electricity, and for good reason. Contact with exposed conductors, line voltage, or high voltage equipment can shock or burn. But other sources of energy can be just as dangerous. High pressure air can injure your eyes, ears, and cause openings or cuts to the skin. Airflow can also cause small objects to become airborne missiles. A pinhole leak in a hydraulic line can slice skin and inject toxic oil into the body. A gas or liquid can injure you or make you sick if it's toxic, flammable, corrosive, or if it reacts with other chemicals. Equipment or machinery can injure tissue and bones through crushing, laceration, or impalement. Thermal hazards can cause burns or fires. Remember, nearly all sources of energy can unexpectedly start up, energize, or release. They must be identified and locked, blocked, or released before anyone performs service or maintenance. Each piece of equipment at your work site should have a detailed lockout tagout procedure. In general, there are 7 steps for safe lockout tagout. First, make sure you know about all energy sources that power the equipment. Look for hidden sources such as springs, capacitors, and elevated parts. Next, tell all affected employees that you're ready to start a lockout procedure. Step 3. Stop the equipment by using its normal shutdown procedure. Step 4. Isolate the equipment by turning off the energy at the main power source. Step 5. Apply a lock to the energy isolating device. The lock or the tag that goes with it must clearly indicate who applied the lockout device. If it's not possible to lock out an energy source, a tag alone can be used as a warning device. Treat this tag as if it is a lock. If several people are going to work on a piece of equipment, each one must apply his or her own lock. In this case, you'll need a multiple lockout device. Step 6. Release or secure any stored energy. This may involve draining valves, releasing hydraulic pressure, blocking moving parts, or however it's detailed in your company's procedures. Step 7. Try to restart the machine to verify that the power is shut off. Then, return the machine switch to the off position. Outside contractors also need to be aware of your company's lockout-tagout procedures. And if contractors will be placing locks or tags, they need to let your employer know so everyone affected can be notified. Lockout-tagout devices may not be bypassed or ignored, and a lock or tag can only be removed by the person who put it there. After the service work is finished, here are 5 steps to release the equipment from lockout-tagout. First, check to make sure that all tools have been removed and all the machine guards are back in place. Check that all employees are clear of the machine. If you can't see inside a piece of equipment, take a head count. Next, remove the lockout-tagout devices. Each person must remove his or her own lock and tag. Before you restart the equipment, notify all affected employees that the lockout-tagout devices have been removed. And finally, restore energy to the equipment. There are just a couple of other things to keep in mind about the lockout-tagout rules. One has to do with what happens at the end of a shift. A high percentage of accidents happen just after shift changes. It's often due to a lack of communication. That's why you should try to meet at the lockout-tagout device with the person you're relieving. And then before you leave, meet with the person who's relieving you. In general, if a piece of equipment is locked out at a shift change, the person on the next shift has to apply his lock before you can remove yours. If for some reason the person who applied the lock is not around, the supervisor may remove the lock and tag only after verifying that the employee who applied the lock is not at the job site and after making reasonable efforts to reach the employee. Before that employee returns to work, the employer must let him know that the lock or tag has been removed and the system is no longer de-energized.
We really go through a detailed procedure on lockout-tagout. Make it personal to that individual. You know, we're all here working on a job, but we also want to go home in good condition. And so do it for yourself. Be a little bit selfish.
Sometimes you'll hear that safety is just a matter of common sense. Well, for lockout-tagout, you need more than common sense. You also need to be trained on the specific lockout-tagout procedures for the equipment you work with. Your employer must provide that training before you work near machinery, so pay close attention. And if you're not sure what to do, ask your supervisor. That way, your workplace will be safer for both you and your coworkers.